I'm Andrew Bisharat, a writer covering adventure topics for National Geographic including wingsuit base jumping. Ask me anything. Is there a threshold for death that would be considered unacceptable for the sport to be condoned legally, or even so socially? 1 in 100 jumps resulting in death. 1 in 10. 1 in 5. There's no way to make it perfectly safe, and I'm not trying to suggest that it's too inherently unsafe to allow. I'm just wondering what kind of theoretical morality would cross the line for you. It's okay if there's no line, as long as there is personal autonomy to make these decisions, i.e. there is no government or company masking the reality in order to make money or whatever. People should be free to do as they wish. What's on your bucket list? Right now it's getting back into climbing shape, raising 2 girls to be strong young women, and maybe writing a book or 2. Close bracket. 1 being no risk and 10 being most. Where do you sit? Risk taking is something that changes over time, and now that I'm 38, birthday yesterday, and have 2 young daughters, I'm sure that my tolerance for risk is much further down the scale than it was in my 20s. But I'd prefer not to think in terms of risk when doing any kind of outdoor adventure. I prefer to think in terms of consequences, since that is a much more rational, easy to gauge concept. Risk is abstract, but consequences are tangible. To bring it back to the topic du jour, the base jumping community, there is a big range of personalities who seem to approach risk/consequence from very different perspectives. It can be jarring to see how many of these folks speak about doing these incredibly dangerous things, like throwing themselves off a cliff, with an almost robotic dispassionate degree of rationality, as if they are solving a math problem. Others tend to fit the adrenaline junkie mode, and for them, it's more about getting hyped up and throwing themselves off into the abyss. Do you think that the existence of social media / GoPros and such has made adventure sports more dangerous? Why or why not? It's important to understand that danger is somewhat of a constant. It doesn't change. What does change is the skill set of the person doing the sport. A sport can be dangerous, but the risk can be low if the athlete's skill set is high enough. GoPros and others seem to have had the effect of putting ideas in the heads of people whose skills aren't high enough that they too can be a hero. That's the real danger. My dad is a seasoned, 30+ years, skydiver and hold the opinion that base jumpers and wing sitters in general are completely insane. Do you find that, even in a sport as dangerous as base jumping, there are some people / groups who consider themselves to be more safe or take fewer risks than other groups / individuals? Absolutely. Everyone thinks that they are doing it right, even the people who aren't. But the people who seem to be doing it right are the ones who are most willing to walk away on any given day. I've also always been fascinated by the differences in risk-taking behavior between the 2 genders. There aren't many female wingsuit base jumpers, but the ones who are doing it, like Steph Davis, seem to be doing it really well. She's extremely calculated and honest with herself and her current level of abilities. She seems to understand really well how much skill is required to execute something safely and honestly assess where her skills are. I think that kind of dispassionate calculus is needed to make such a risky endeavor sustainable. Hi there. Why do you think people take up wingsuit base jumping, especially when it's considered to be such a deadly sport? And what's something you think people misunderstand the most about the sport or the athletes? First, you don't just take up wingsuit base jumping, you start skydiving, then get into base jumping, then fly wingsuits in a skydiving context, then ultimately try wingsuit base. The reasons people want to get into this sport are reasons that go back as far as humans have walked the earth and looked up and seen birds in the sky. It's that primal desire to fly. This sport is the closest humanity has come to achieving that dream of flight. Those rewards, that rush, that sense of freedom and autonomy, for many outweigh the sense that life could be cut short. I think the most misunderstood thing about this sport is the perception that people are being somehow reckless with their own lives. It's interesting to see how judgmental people can be toward those who do risky things that might potentially kill them. All our lives are finite, and for many risk takers, it's a quality over quantity calculation. But obviously, quantity counts too. We want to lead long, fulfilling lives. Some of us get lucky, and some don't. Hi Andrew. Thanks so much for answering questions. You mention in your story how a lot of the wingsuit base jumping craze in 2016 was fueled by viral video, which is now harder to generate. Is there another adventure trend you anticipate being fueled similarly by social media? Good question. I have some concerns after reading some stories about Instagram influencers trying to get photographs of themselves in sketchy/dangerous/forbidden places. I have concerns about people trying to push the limits just to get a picture or video that's more viral, more extreme, more insane. The fact that it's getting harder and harder to do this, to wow us with something new, only means that people will need to take bigger risks to generate that kind of viral content. What so many young athletes in these genres don't do is ask themselves, why am I really doing this? If the answer is, for the likes, then I think that is a bad reason. Do you think there would be less participation if more focus was on the aftermath of base accidents? I don't think anyone ever jumps without 5 GoPros rolling. Not that I'm advocating a faces of death montage to discourage others. I personally would like to see more attention paid to the family/friend devastation. Just seems so risky, especially considering attitude echoed post-incident is always something like he had every variable planned out/freak accident/he was so careful/I can't believe it happened. It really takes some mental gymnastics to see the best around you die and think that you're somehow different. Seems akin to being a professional Russian roulette player. Also, would you consider base jumping a sport? Just what the hell is a sport? I think there has been a lot of focus on the death and aftermath. Our 2016 article was all about this, and the new article seems to track how people, perhaps, have been discouraged by the death to keep jumping. I spoke to a few people who admitted as such that their excitement for base jumping plummeted, excuse the pun, after 2016's carnage. Yes, I consider base jumping a sport, and I'd imagine that, if it had existed 100 years ago, Hemingway might have included it in his famous dictum of the only 3 sports. There are only 3 sports: bullfighting, motor racing, and mountaineering. All the rest are merely games. Thanks for the AMA. I'm curious what has been the biggest risk you've ever taken has been. Also, what are your favorite places to travel, and why? I think the biggest risks I've taken are just following a non-traditional path in life of figuring out how to be a climber and a writer more or less on my own. I didn't have role models and didn't know what I was doing. These non-traditional paths are more common nowadays, and I think that's a great thing for the next generation. I love the climbing in France, the food and the culture. It's a place I'll return to again and again. Same with New Zealand. But maybe Lebanon and Venezuela are 2 of my favorite places that I've been. I'd love to go back to Lebanon soon. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe so I can afford to buy VR.